Good morning from the Netherlands and good evening in Australia. Today we have a match between two teams from Australia who will be competing in 8th of finals. I give the floor to my colleague Anna Maria Orbanova from the Quarks Foundation.
Thank you very much and good day everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the second round of the 8th finals. So the second match of the final phase of the Hague University Law Debate Competition in 2024. Good day to Monash University team and the University of Melbourne's team. So today the teams will debate on the topic whether or not it should be mandatory for sports leagues to implement free of charge mental health programs for all players to address problems like anxiety, stress, and depression. As always, we'll figure out and find out which team will represent which side after the allocation of positions. Now for a reintroduction of the participants, starting with University of Melbourne, Mr. Sirtas.
Good morning, good evening. My name is Alexander Siorthis, and I am here with Oscar Calvert for the University of Melbourne.
Thank you and welcome again from Monash University, Mr. Law.
Hi, my name's Joel Law, and I'm with Michael Tan.
Thank you. Welcome again from University of Melbourne, Mr. Calvert.
Hello, my name's Oscar on behalf of Melbourne Law School.
Thank you and welcome, and as well Mr. Tan from Monash University.
Good morning, good evening everyone. My name is Michael from Monash, final year Law and Commerce student.
Thank you. Welcome. So in a short while you should see the allocation of positions, which will be through the screen sharing. And just give me confirmation when you can see my screen, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Right. So in a short second, we'll know which team will defend which side. As always, there are two possibilities for each team. So for today's debate, it will be Monash University from Melbourne defending the position against, and the Melbourne University from Melbourne as well, defending the position in favor. To confirm, the University of Melbourne will argue that it should be mandatory for sports leagues to implement free of charge mental health programs for all players to address problems like anxiety, stress, and depression, whereas the Monash University team will argue that it should not be mandatory for such implementation. You will now have 5 minutes to finalize your preparation. Feel free to close your cameras. Thank you, everyone. Your final time for preparation is now over. We'll be starting with the team in favor with your opening statements. University of Melbourne's team, you now have 4 minutes.
Good morning, good evening. On the notion that it should be mandatory for sports leagues to implement free of charge mental health programs for all players to address problems like anxiety, stress, and depression, we are the team in favour. Mental health is increasingly recognised as a public health priority and fundamental right. Recently, the World Health Organization published a soft law instrument titled Mental Health, Human Rights and Legislative Guidance and Practice, which underlined the significance of mental health as a human right and how it is best implemented. The notion that health is purely physical is an outdated notion. There is a growing awareness that mental health has historically been ignored as a form of health, and this has come under strong scrutiny and criticism. Numerous countries have adopted or are considering adopting a form of mental health legislation building on the work of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. In this Olympic and Paralympic year, it's crucial to signal to the world the position that mental health plays in overall well-being. Sports are known to have positive health effects, but they can also be physically and mentally challenging. Coaches push players to work hard, players push themselves to do their best, and invariably, players get injured. It's time to acknowledge that those injuries can not only be physical, but also mental, leaving players with potentially long-term, debilitating mental injuries. Our contention today is that the mandatory provision of health programs, mental health programs in sports is a modern form of first aid. Sports leagues are mandated across the world to have first aid kits and someone capable of administering first aid to an injured player. This ensures the health and safety of the players. The mental health program proposed are a mental health first aid kit, and sports leagues should be obligated to care for mentally injured players, as with those who get physically injured in the course of sports. My partner will build on this and address how this is the logical next step in the expansion of player welfare, among other points, and I will reserve the remainder of my time for rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder, if you have speaking time for certain positions, and the speaking time is only for those third speaking positions, thus any time you have left over will not be transferred to another position. On this note, for the opening statement in the against position, Monash University team, you now have the floor.
Good morning and good evening. Although free mental health care sounds attractive, allowing the league to control its implementation creates a substantial conflict of interest that will further jeopardize athletes and stigmatize mental illness. Instead, governments should use the same capital afforded to the affirmative team to create educational programs promoting awareness of mental health issues and encourage athletes to seek outside mental health support. Today we present two arguments: that the affirmative team's model creates an unacceptable conflict of interest, and that athletes will condemn that model. The affirmatives model creates an unacceptable conflict of interest that will lead to scandals and worse mental health outcomes. The leagues, the teams, the managers, sponsors, family members, and even the athletes themselves all place enormous pressure on the athlete to keep on playing. When that athlete is stressed, develops body dysmorphia, anxiety, depression, etc., whereas a normal practitioner will tell that athlete to quit or take a break, the league's therapists will recommend the athlete continues playing to their detriment. How can practitioners be unduly influenced? First, the league has a clear interest in doctor shopping for a practitioner who will promise to get athletes back on field as soon as possible and can offer enormous financial inducements to those practitioners who cooperate. Second, Therapists know that if an athlete retires because, quote, they can't take it anymore, both the therapist and the athlete will be blamed by fans and the organization for mismanagement, massively impacting their career progression. Third, within the league and the teams, there is a collective groupthink where therapists and managers turn a blind eye to mismanagement because it is easier to suppress their concern than live with the anxiety and immense risk of self-sacrifice. We have seen this type of conduct in the class action case of Dent and NFL, load management in the NBA and National Athletic Associations, and other sports professionals in the handling of PEDs. We don't see why therapy would be any different. As a result, therapists may advise a player to continue playing when the correct advice may be to retire. They may pressure players to focus on athletics rather than other elements of their life or their physical or mental health. Third, a single therapist may be tasked with separately counseling both sides of an interpersonal conflict. Fourth, a therapist may voluntarily or otherwise be financially pressured to disclose confidential information to their employer. Please note that these conflicts not only hurt the athletes, but bring the entire mental health system into disrepute. Our second argument is that the athletes will condemn the affirmatives model. There is substantial pressure on athletes to portray themselves as strong and invulnerable. This is the image corporate sponsors are looking for when they give advertising contracts. It is also important because teammates and coaches rely on more stable players. It determines decisions like who makes the starting lineup or takes control in high-pressure situations. Secondly, the therapeutic intervention under the affirmatives model is mandatory and thus non-consensual. Note, there is already stigma against therapy in society that is further amplified by the locker room culture existing in sports. Because it is not the athlete's decision, they will not have agency over any advice and will see therapy as an attack on their identity. Finally, players can see the clear conflict of interest and they know the notorious history of leagues and can understand that their therapy can be used against them. As a result, players are 1. Unlikely to meaningfully use and engage in mental health services, 2. Condemn those who use mental health services, and 3. Are locked out from seeking an external therapist who would actually have acted in their best interests. These outcomes will further promote a culture of toxic masculinity, contributing to the stigma against seeking help for mental health. Additionally, when an athlete eventually has their mental health collapse, this will create a scandal that further denigrates the perceived need and efficacy of therapy. Thank you.
Thank you. This now concludes the opening statements. We'll now proceed to the rebuttals, starting with the first rebuttal in favor. University of Melbourne, you have 2 minutes. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. We maintain that sports leagues should provide mental health, especially in this Olympic and Paralympic year. The opposition mentioned several points, including a conflict of interest, which I would just like to address briefly. No one would claim, for example, that nurses who provide first aid have a conflict of interest by being employed by a sports league in the administration of that first aid. In fact, it's a very important resource for players to get the help that they need at the time that they are injured. By postponing that and leaving it to medical practitioners after an injury, where you're at the hospital or where the severity of the injury has already been exacerbated, would only undermine players' interests. Secondly, other points were raised on seeing therapy as an attack on identity and fostering some points which we didn't necessarily follow. But the problem of neglecting mental health is precisely what causes injured players to continue working hard. If there was this provision of mental health resources for players to turn to, they could balance the competing interests between performing at a high level and also their own mental well-being and sustainability. Third, we'd point to the sustainable development goal number 3 on good health and well-being, and the fact that this is an increasing public health priority as stated by the World Health Organization. And it's not purely for health practitioners to implement mental health outcomes, it's for society to do so. And society is known to have an influence on mental health outcomes. So with that, we maintain that they should provide mental health, especially in this year. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now have the time for the first rebuttal in the against position. Monash University, you have 2 minutes.
We agree that mental health is super important, but that's obviously something that both teams will agree on. What I would note is that our learned friends must be able to tell us why the goals of the international mental health community are best met through the method of practice that they are trying to implement. And that is what the core debate is about. But they have yet to give us constructive reasons as to why this model would be likely to succeed and be effective, given that there are significant problems that athletes would face trusting that system that they are proposing in this debate. What we told you was very important and was unresponded to, because the conflict of interest point that Michael talks about happens because this system is fundamentally one that is mandatory. It is something that is non-consensual. Often that means that players feel like they can't necessarily trust these practitioners because they might tell them to, they might tell them to actually stay on when they shouldn't be staying on. And they don't trust them because they think that these psychologists are, seeing another teammate who is giving that player a social difficulties or might be bullying them. All these things also mean that people are very much afraid of using that system to their benefit because they are afraid of being teased. Obviously, the conflict of interest exists in this particular case when you have doctor shopping. And nurses obviously have a significant less propensity to be having that conflict of interest like they highlighted, precisely in the same way that we think that a lot of these psychologists, para-counselors, they have a significantly higher likelihood and scale of propensity when it comes to actually being in that conflict of interest, precisely for the reasons that Michael discloses in his speech. That was critically the reason why we were so proud to negate the topic.
Thank you. For the second rebuttal in the favor position, University of Melbourne, you have 2 minutes.
We thank our learned friends as to the identification of our model and perhaps some rebuttals concerning this. Firstly, I'd like to address the conflict of interest point, and in fact, we submit that it's an alignment of interests. Rather than a conflict, there is an alignment of interests between leagues and players here. We know that healthier athletes perform better, contributing to the success of their teams and the league itself. By ensuring that players are mentally fit, feeling well, leagues are investing in essentially their own success. This mutual benefit underscores the complementary nature of mandatory mental health programs and competitive sports success. Secondly, issue was raised to do with potential stigmas between players and their respective clubs. We put forward that a mandatory program goes to the heart of this stigma. A common concern might be that mandatory mental health programs stigmatise athletes, marking them as weak or unstable, I believe the word was used. However, in reality, these programs can be framed and implemented as part of routine health maintenance, similar to physical training sessions, physiotherapy sessions, and doctors. By normalising mental health care as part of regular health and performance maintenance, leagues can help reduce this stigma, rather than perpetuate it. Thirdly, I'd like to address a critical point to do with our model. A mandatory program is the logical next step in the expansion of player welfare. One of the most significant issues in sports law. Rest my case.
Thank you. To hear the second rebuttal of the against position, Monash University, you have 2 minutes.
I thank my learned friends for their arguments. At this point in this debate, the only attack on our case has been that there is no conflict of interest because, by analogy, nurses also have no conflict of interest. I note at the outset that the rebuttal posed by the affirmative team was not analytical in nature, but was rather a reason by analogy. But we would agree that, sure, nurses in low-risk scenarios have no conflict of interest with the sports league and are great. But that is not the same as mental health professionals. And we would note that actually talking about medical professionals generally, like nurses and doctors of sports team, is actually a terrible example for the affirmative team's case. As we saw in the class action case between Dover and NFL, this was a massive scandal involving multiple health professionals who failed to diagnose chronic head injuries, basically caused by concussions to NFL players, and under the pressure of management, didn't tell athletes to take a break. We think that these same types of harms that applied in this landmark case would also apply in the context of mental health professionals, which would lead to all the harms that we have addressed throughout our bench. This means that athletes will not get the help that they needed. This means that athletes would be pressured to be staying on the field when they are being anxious and stressed. And when they eventually have a mental health collapse, and that is portrayed on wide media, the people's trust in the mental health system is substantially impacted, and people are less likely to go to therapy. They're less likely to trust their counselors because they've seen confidentiality scandals on the news. Please note that our alternative that has not been responded to was governments using the same amount of money and capital put forward to the affirmative team to educate athletes on the importance of mental health so that they can seek it themselves externally. They have the money to do so. There's no conflict of interest in these situations, and it is consensual, which is why our model was far better. Thank you.
Thank you. This marks the end of rebuttals. We'll now proceed to the conclusions. Starting with the position in favor, Team of University of Melbourne, you have 2 minutes.
The imperative to treat mental health as a fundamental right and a priority in public health is clear and increasingly recognised globally. The World Health Organization's recent guidance underscores mental health's intrinsic role in human rights, aligning with foundational international declarations and covenants. As we navigate this Olympic and Paralympic year, it is paramount that we broaden our understanding of player and athlete well-being beyond the physical to include mental health. We know sport is often a proxy for this. This is an opportunity, recognizing that mental injuries are as debilitating and, if not even more significant, as physical ones. The necessity for mental health programs in sports is not just a recommendation, but it should be considered as essential physical first aid. Just as we mandate physical first aid provisions in sports, mental health care must also be seen as a non-negotiable if the world is to take this seriously. A fundamental component of the health and safety protocols which protect our players should be incorporated through mental health programs. We know this approach not only supports athletes and players in performing their best, but also in respect to their right to healthcare when considering things such as duty of care. Thank you.
Thank you for your conclusion. Now for the conclusion in the against position, Team of Monash University, you have 2 minutes.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Please see that my brain is given to the NFL's brain bank. Those were the last words of former NFL star Dave Duerson, who shot himself in the chest so that he could die without damaging his brain. These are the facts of the 2012 case of estate of Dave Duerson and NFL at the Cook County Circuit Court in Illinois. This was part of a class action against the NFL in 2012, where more than 4,500 retired players, family members, and representatives sued the NFL. The league throwing money to subsidize this mental health program from the affirmative team is only an attempt to limit the league's legal liability without considering how athletes might simply distrust that sort of program, precisely because of the conflict of interests that we discussed, precisely because of the fact that they do not trust the clinicians to actually be sufficiently independent, because they think that they might be judgmental as a result of having spoken to multiple different players that might have privately vilified that single player in individual sessions. That was critically the reason why we told you that a conflict of interest necessarily reduced the meaningful access to the program, which limited a lot of the effectiveness that the affirmative team wanted to push in this debate. More importantly, doctor shopping happens significantly more in these instances with severe impacts compared to nurses, as we've correctly pointed out both in Michael and my responses, meaning to say that the scale of the conflict of interest is at an unacceptable level, and that the league cannot be trusted to do this in a way that necessarily is meaningful for these individuals. That critically was the reason why ultimately we suggested to you that the affirmative team really didn't win this debate, for the reason that they only told us why mental health was important, but didn't justify their approach towards trying to solve that mental health problem.
Thank you. Thank you to both teams. Congratulations on completing your 8th finals match, your first match in the final phase for both teams. You can now relax. You are no longer graded after this part. As always, we have a little bit of round of feedback that you can share with each other, share with the opposing team, how you found the preparation, the topic, maybe if you were surprised by some of the arguments from the other party, or if you heard something that you also had in your preparation. Perhaps starting with University of Melbourne, Mr. Calvert. How did you find today's debate and the preparation?
Yeah, it was really refreshing to engage in a topic such as this. I'd say we all know someone or know of someone who is going through, whether it be mental health or stress, or even engaging in sporting competitions, and whether it's struggling to speak up or what have you. So it was really, really, I think, relevant topic for today.
Thank you for sharing. What about you, Mr. Law? How did you find the debate, the preparation, the topic perhaps as well?
Found it very interesting. I think the broad amount of research suggests that it isn't just that they suffer from mental health problems, it is that they suffer physical injuries that make them significantly more susceptible to mental health problems. For example, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is this really complex chronic form of brain trauma that leads to them often taking their lives via suicide, and that's one of the leading causes of death in former NFL players. And I think that is something that made the debate quite interesting for me in the lead up for the preparation.
Thank you for sharing. Mr. Sutas, how did you find the ACE finals match? Did you perhaps in your team have a different approach to the group phase than to the final phase match? Or perhaps maybe this was already also a familiar topic, being in the health law area or topic related to sports?
No, I think it was. I haven't taken health law or sports law before. It's not a particular, forte of mine, but it was interesting reading some of the literature. It is topical, so the theme being that this is an Olympic or Paralympic year, the fact that the International Olympic Committee has actually come out with a program for mental health is, striking, or at least something of note. So it was interesting. It was an area that I hadn't previously delved into. I didn't know that the WHO, WHO, particularly from a media perspective, you think of the sort of the COVID pronouncements rather than mental health provisions. But reading up on it and how it's increasing as a health priority was an interesting thing to do.
Thank you for sharing. Mr. Tan, how did you find the experience? Did your team have a different approach to group phase than to final phase, perhaps? And maybe the topic, was it familiar, being it a health law or sports law related?
Yeah, I think our approach was relatively the same. We've been trying to refine it at every step of the competition, but I think it's nice having, I guess, the in rounds beforehand, or out rounds, sorry, to practice was really good. And in terms of the motion, it is the second sports motion of this debate, but I think this one was quite different, and I really enjoyed it because it pulled in together a bit of like sports economics potentially, as well as being very topical, which I really enjoyed.
Right. Thank you for sharing. I will now pass the floor to my colleague for the final part of today's debate. And I just want to once again say congratulations on passing the H finals. The 3 judges will grade at their earliest opportunity, and once we have all the scores and confirmed all the scores, you will know the results.
Yes, so many thanks. So first of all, we can already tell that there will be a team from Australia in quarterfinals, because you are both from Australia. So, and in quarterfinal it will be in around 2 weeks. Of course, we'll wait for the results from the 3 judges who are watching probably, or will be watching today the match. For the last part concerning the networking, it will be knowing about the activities you have as students in your universities, particularly the student associations. So I'm not sure if you are part of a student association currently in your university, or maybe a debate club or a moot court, anyway, a part of your university which is dedicated to such activity. But I will ask you, as a team, of course, what are the activities available for law students particularly? I will start with Monash University, Mr. Low and Mr. Tan. Could you tell us if you are part of a debate club, or you have been, or there is one currently happening, I don't know, or are there more larger student associations at the law school where you are studying currently? So Mr. Low and Mr. Tan, could you tell us?
Yeah, so I'm in my final year now. From 2020, I started in the debating club at Monash, which was really helpful for my development in critical thinking, and I really enjoyed that. Aside from that, in terms of public speaking, the Law Student Society does a pretty good job to host a few mooting competitions, negotiations competitions, and client interviews, which I've done a bit in my past and have enjoyed. But yeah, I guess the way they split it up is that the Law Society does all the law comps and debating does all the debating comps.
Okay, Mr. Low as well.
So I joined the Monash Association of Debaters in 2021 in my first year of uni, and I did quite a fair bit of debating in high school as well. I ended up also representing the university for some moots. Michael here is just being really humble. Michael has represented Monash at the Jessup moot, so he has significant mooting experience on top of debating experience.
Okay, thank you very much. In the University of Melbourne, I remember a long time ago I went visiting your university in 2015. There was a center, I think, for mooting. Could you tell us more, Mr. Surtas or Mr. Calvert, what are the activities in this regard possible?
Do you want me to take that one? Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much similar, pretty much identical actually to the same that Monash offers. Yeah, just negotiation competitions, client interviews, witness exams. There are external competitions and internal competitions, this being one of the external competitions. Others are the Jessup Moot. Melbourne doesn't participate in this, but there's the Alfred Deakin that we participated in, and yeah, there are a variety of different opportunities available, but I don't think it's a massive point of distinction between any university, really.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Cavert?
Yeah, I concur with everything Alex mentions there, and just sort of, I suppose on the topic of the debate, it's certainly not a mandate to be involved in any sort of extracurricular mooting or what have you, but particularly in Victoria, the high school competition, I'm not sure whether our friends were involved in the Debaters Association of Victoria, but that's a pretty large one here. So feeding into university, being involved in that, and then with moots and what have you, yeah.
Okay, good to know. In any case, we are very happy, of course, to have Australian teams participating, because we can see indeed that you have as well a supporting debate club center behind that is very good as well for the law studies. In any case, what will happen from now is obviously we will disclose the results as soon as we will receive them, and we'll be reviewing them, we hope, by the end of this week, because as you know, for the final phase, now the timing is very strict for the judge, because we cannot tell who will be, of course, in quarterfinals before receiving those results. So arranging for the scheduling, and as well, you will know about as well the scheduling of your match of quarterfinals as soon as we know if you qualify. So that's why we tell to the judge, and we ask only the judge who have never been late or have been excused for being late once or twice to assess those match. So it means around the 6th to 8th, I think, May, this is when you will have the quarterfinals match, so 4 match, of course, and 2 weeks later will be the semi-finals. One thing important, as soon as the results of the quarterfinals will be issued, it means you will have automatically 2 match. It means semi-finals and as well the final or the match for the 3rd place. But that will be at the end of, after we receive the results of the quarterfinals. The reason is because, if you plan, or if you are supported to plan to travel to the Netherlands, it's possible. If you cannot, of course, it will be possible to have the finals in by video, because we have the venue for that. But in any case, for us as organizers, this is the reason why you will probably receive the results within this week. And then we'll be able to announce, of course, the next match, all the next match of the quarterfinals around that time. So many thanks already. We will let you enjoy your evening, of course. For us, it's the start of the week, start of the day. But don't hesitate to watch as well the match of the others. So concretely, the winner of this match, where you were competing today, will have a match in quarterfinals against the winner of the University of Birmingham versus University of Lagos. Will be later today. So thank you again. Thank you in Australia, and wish you the best in Melbourne. I miss being in Melbourne. I've been a long time ago. I was in Australia, in Sydney actually, in November, but I didn't go that time to Melbourne. But many thanks again, and we keep in touch. Thank you, Mr. Benova.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.